This episode is brought to you by enviedhemp.com. Envied has been my choice for my CBD needs for almost a year now, and I can't begin to tell you how it has improved my life. They come in 3 formulas: Clarity, Relief, and Relax. I take a Clarity drop in the morning with my coffee to get me focused, then a drop of Relief for my aches and pains and inflammation after a run or a workout. Then I do a drop of the Relax before I go to bed to help me sleep. I've gotten some of the best sleep that I've had in years, and now with my Whoop band, my recovery band, I can prove it. And now they've come out with a new mixture called Immunity, which we all need to stave off COVID-19. The Immunity Boost is a mixture of turmeric, grapefruit extract, elderberry, licorice root, and vitamin C, which we all could use a little bit more, I'm sure. I just got my first shipment in and took my first drop this morning. They come in drops, which is my choice, a tincture, roll-ons for those aches and pains, and then also gummies, which I think a lot of people out there use the gummies. So you can get it however you choose. So go place your order today. Go to enviedhemp.com and use the code GURU20 for a 20% discount for life. CBD is a great supplement to keep you healthy and safe during these crazy times. So let's get to this week's episode.
It's not what you know, it's what you can prove.
You know how to cut to the core of me, Baxter. You're so wise. But like a miniature Buddha covered in hair.
I want to become a guru so girls will like me. Then I will like myself.
Now, before we do this, let's go over the ground rules. Rule number 1. No touching of the hair or face.
Of course.
And that's it! Now let's do this!
Are you not entertained? Are you not entertained? Is this not why you are here?
What is up, everybody? Welcome to another episode of the Golf Guru Show. I am Jason Sutton, and I am the Guru. I hope everyone is staying safe and healthy during this global pandemic, and that you're doing your social distancing, and hopefully we will get back to work very soon. But until then, I'll continue to bring you the most informative and interesting conversations with some of the best in our construction business and in all fields of study. Thank you so much for supporting the podcast, and make sure you download this episode and hit that purple subscribe button so you don't miss any upcoming shows when they drop. My guest on this episode is Bill Schmedes III. Bill is a very talented and incredible young coach. He is the director of instruction at Forest Gate Country Club in Monroe Township, New Jersey. A few highlights of his accomplishments in his bio. He is one of the best young teachers in America, ranked by Golf Digest. One of the best in state, ranked by Golf Digest as well. A top 30 instructor by Golf Tips magazine. And Bill is also the inventor of a great new training aid called the Impact Press, which I think you all should check out. Go to his website at impactpressgolf.com to order your new training aid, and follow Bill on IG and Twitter at BS3Golf. So without further delay, let's get to this awesome conversation with my good friend Bill Schmedes III. Enjoy.
Jason, I've got to ask you, what type of wine are you drinking this evening?
I've got a little blend. This is actually what I was drinking last night a little bit. It's a no name. Couldn't even tell you what it is. Let's see. I know that I will go for a good one, but tonight I just wanted to finish this up. It's a California red wine from St. Helena's. And it's one of those where they'll put like the state on it, like they'll do different states. It's not bad though. Like again, it's one of those just everyday, what I'd call sort of a cheap wine that I picked up. I've got an app called Vivino. I don't know. Do you drink much wine?
I don't. I honestly, if somebody would ask me what type of wine do you drink, I said whatever you're drinking. I don't have a clue. Yeah. I'm like a big beer guy. That's about it.
Right. No, I'm a craft beer guy too, but I've gone to, over this quarantine, I've gone to some seltzer, which I've never thought I would ever do.
Just I haven't tried that yet.
For calories, just whatever. But I don't know. I got an 18-year-old son that steers me in directions that I don't want to go sometimes. But anyways, yeah. So this is just a no name. It's not bad. I mean, I've thrown plenty of bottles away. This one's okay, but I won't be going to buy cases of it. Yeah. So that's what I'm drinking. What do you got going there? You got a little beer going? What kind of beer?
I've got something new here. I'm going to show you.
Yeah.
It's brand new.
Okay.
I'm just kidding.
It's
not new at all.
Is that Canadian?
Oh yeah, for sure. It's cheap. It's fantastic. It's refreshing, and
yeah,
it seemed like a perfect beer for this evening.
Awesome. Because you're in Jersey, right?
I am in Jersey.
Yeah.
Northern Jersey. We're about 45 minutes from New York City.
You're in the hotbed of the COVID-19, or close to it.
Oh my goodness. Yeah, we're right in the heart of it, unfortunately. And my wife is actually a nurse. So she's been dealing with all these patients that are coming in. Normally she works in the ER, and now the ER is pretty much turned into like COVID County. So it's pretty bad here. I would say obviously New York is, I believe, the worst hit state, but I think we might be number 2 maybe. It's tough for a lot of people around here, and everything's closed. No golf courses open, so a lot of self-quarantining.
The people in the front lines are taking it, man. I mean, kudos to her and what she's doing.
Yeah, it's something that I think only certain people can do. You can't give these people enough credit right now. Doctors, nurses, first responders. It's brand new times, and it's got to be very difficult.
No doubt. Well, cool, man. Let's start the show. What do you say?
Perfect. Let's get it going.
Man. Welcome to the show, man. It's good. It's great to have you on, and I'm interested to kind of dig into your backstory and what you're doing, and obviously we can talk a lot about what you've been doing in your off time, like all of us. But I want to start with your training aid, man. I think this is really interesting. And I know it's something you're really proud of, the Impact Press. Talk a little bit about what it does, and then I want to dig into it a little deeper of like how you came up with the idea, the process of what goes into doing a training aid, because that's a difficult thing. It's not an easy project, I'm sure.
It's a whole new world. You think that, you've been working in the golf industry long enough, and you're like, well, it's golf clubs and it's golf and it's instruction in a way, and you would think it would be easy, and it's the opposite. I've been very lucky to have a number of people in the industry that work at training aid companies or formerly ran training aid companies, so they've helped me a bunch with connections and how to get it off the ground and what to do, because otherwise I wouldn't have a clue. But Jason, I appreciate you having me on. Big fan of the podcast. I've been listening since you originally started it. You do a fantastic job. So the Impact Press was originally started and built on the lesson tee in a club repair room. I was trying to get a golfer to exaggerate and react in a certain way that was like a 360-degree difference from what they were currently doing. So I kind of figured out this crazy looking club and bent it a number of different ways and drew a couple lines on it. And that's originally where it started about 2.5 to 3 years ago. So it's taken a little while to kind of get it going. We've gone through a number of different models to make sure that it's optimal and it can react and interact with the turf correctly. Because the design of the club, if you can imagine just holding a 7-iron straight out in a playing position in front of you, the design of the iron at address is one where the club face is closed and pointed at the golfer's lead toe. So it looks like the sweet spots almost point at your lead toe. So the golf club face is closed by like 30 degrees, right? So it looks a little crazy at address, right? There's a red line or indicator that's on the hosel of the golf club, and there's a green line or indicator that's on the top line of the golf club. So if you're getting set up correctly, the red indicator goes right towards the center of your body as that club face is closed, pointed towards your lead toe there. And then the objective of the golfer is to react to that closed club face design and get the green indicator to point at the target at impact. So it's very similar to there's, the old school drill, that closed club face drill that I'm sure you've probably seen. That's kind of originally where it started with me. And I quickly realized just trying to do that with a normal club, the club just doesn't interact with the turf very well. The toe digs and balls are going to be hit off kind of towards the heel or the hosel, and there's very little loft, so the ball doesn't come out to the correct trajectory. So we've had to make a number of alterations to kind of the sole and the bounce and the lie angle to make the design work, going from that shut to, let's say, square playing position there. But really what it does is it forces golfers to start to use the ground differently, to start to use their body differently, and to start to change the wrist conditions. And each golfer, it's interesting. So I've given this to everybody from the high handicapper all the way to the mini tour player, and they might all react differently, but there's all those kind of three components in the move. Just some might be happening at different times in order to kind of get to that, we'll call it a tour caliber impact position. So we've had nice success so far. We debuted at the PGA show in Orlando this year. That was pre-sale. And then right after the show, we went live online, pretty much we'll say the first week of February. And we've been going since. We're in a number of online retailers. We've got the online store going, and it's been a lot of fun, but it's a whole new world. There's a lot of things to figure out, and it's been a fun learning experience for sure.
Who did you reach out to get advice? Like Martin Chuck, or some guys like that have been doing training aids for a while now?
Yeah, great question. So it's crazy how small the world it is. So one of my students went to high school. And by the way, this student now is probably mid-50s. So he went to high school in New Jersey with a gentleman called Rich Massey, who was the CEO of DST Golf. I don't know if you remember DST Golf, but it was the impact iron with like the bent shaft. Henrik Stenson used it when he won the British Open, right?
Yes, so, that's what it made me think about when I first saw it.
Yeah, so he was the CEO of DST Golf, and he's recently moved on, and now he works under Barney Adams at his Barney Adams new putting shaft company. So my student at the time said, "Hey, I know this guy that's in the business, and you might want to reach out to him." So he's the first gentleman that I originally reached out to, and Rich has been amazing. He's done everything for me. He's given me great insight. He's given me contacts. He hasn't charged me a dime. He's even given me like email lists that he's used in the past of consumers and professionals and execs, and the guy's just amazing. So without him, this would be really difficult. He also told me to reach out to Martin Chuck, because before Rich was part of DST Golf, he also helped Martin with Tour Striker originally. So I reached out and I chatted with Martin for probably like an hour or so. Martin was very gracious with his time, and he gave me a lot of good insight. And then there's one other gentleman in the industry too that has also an impact training aid, one that you can't hit golf balls with, but has been very successful. And all three of those gentlemen have been amazing to me. It's like I said, if you're just trying to get into this golf training aid world and you don't know anybody or have the connections, it's got to be really difficult to figure out everything from how to get going, how to get manufacturing, distribution, all the things that go into that before you're even getting it out there and trying to figure out marketing and branding and everything that goes into trying to get something off the ground floor.
Yeah, I was going to say, like, the hardest part is just getting started, right? I mean, I wouldn't know even begin to know how to find somebody to build something, right? Because we're, as golf instructors, we're idea people, right? So you had an idea, and you're like, okay, I would like to look like this, but then like, all right, who do you give it to make that idea come to life? Take us through you don't have to give us all the details, but what do you need to get started?
So it was two versions. So I had two versions of golf clubs that I kind of bent and took from fitting carts and had all these crazy kind of things going on. And I took a bunch of pictures of those 2 clubs at first, and I sent them to the contact that I got overseas, who they now do my manufacturing. And just from sending the photos and giving them like the dimensions, like things that I could actually measure, because there's certain things I don't know how to measure certain things in a golf club, right? I mean,
right.
There's a reason I'm not working for like TaylorMade or something, and I'm standing on a lesson tee, but
Okay.
yeah. So I sent all those things over, and they were able to like get me the first sample, and it was amazing. I mean, it was like, without them knowing everything that I built on my own and had in my hand, it was pretty close. It wasn't like optimal, but there were a lot of really good things about it. And then we continued to kind of tweak it over time. And a number of samples later, we had the finished product. So again, if I didn't have those contacts, I have no idea how somebody would go about trying to get something out. I mean, you would have to do probably a ton of searching and making a lot of phone calls in order to try and figure out how to get that going originally.
Yeah, that's so cool. And we'll definitely plug that at the end of the show, so everybody can log on to the site or however they can order it.
Sure, thank you.
For sure. But yeah, that's so cool. It's always interesting to me. I have barely enough time to do everything that I try to do in my life, and I can imagine taking up another project, because I've talked to Martin. He's a good buddy of mine. And it's like what that guy does is insane. To be a top instructor like you and him, and then also have it's like another side business. So kudos to you, man, and good luck to that product. I mean, I checked it out, man. It looks awesome. Like you said, I love training aids that don't do it for the student, if that makes sense. The student has to react to it.
Yeah, 100%.
I think that's what makes it good. Yeah, I think that's what makes it really good. But it reminded me of the old golfing machine drill where we would shut the face and then tell people to try to not make it go left.
Exactly. And that's originally how I started. And then I was like, well,
Great.
people are shanking the crap out of the ball, and the ball's coming out low if they, do find the face. And I was like, there's gotta be a better way to kind of figure this out. So yeah, I appreciate it. Thank you.
Absolutely. So for the 2 people out there that don't know who you are, let's dig back into your past and where you got started, and take us through your career and your backstory.
Sure. So I grew up here in New Jersey. I grew up actually in down by the shore in a place called Tom's River, and growing up, I honestly didn't get the chance to get a golf club in my hand until I was probably like 11 or 12 years old. I played every other sport underneath the sun. We were out on the streets all day until the street lights came on, playing football, basketball, baseball, soccer, you name it. But really never picked a golf club up until 11 or 12, which like nowadays is pretty late based on how early a lot of these kids are, starting the game. So my grandparents actually were the ones that got me into the game. And early on, honestly, I didn't have a lot of like formal instruction or teaching, really from when I started all the way up and through like high school. Like I tried a couple lessons, did like a few clinics, but that was about it. I kind of figured everything out on my own, kind of watching videos and reading magazines. And I'm sure, a lot of that screwed me up, and, I'm sure some of it helped at the same time. But I fell in love with it really quickly. And by the time I was in high school, it was pretty much just golf and basketball. And by the time I graduated, or even my junior into my senior year, it was just golf. Following high school, played 1 year of college golf. I just went one year of college. I went to the golf mecca of the country. I went to a university in Maine, followed a girl up there, and it was a Division III golf team. I had opportunities to go south, and I was like, you know what? I think I'm going to go to Maine to play college golf. It was a blast, though. I had a good time there. I had a good season. I was named first team all conference player at the end of the season. But school for me, it was never a thing. I didn't enjoy it. I always knew I was going to be in the golf business. And then following that freshman year, I had a good friend of mine who was the first assistant at a golf club on Cape Cod, and he got me a position as the second assistant there. They have it's called Blue Rock Golf Club. It's like a little small resort on Cape Cod, and they also they're well known for their golf school. At least they used to be. Golf schools are kind of dead now. But I got my feet wet there, and the crazy thing is my buddy who got me the position. He never came back from Florida for that season. So he got me the position. I was like, oh, it's going to be great. I'm working under my buddy. I'm second assistant. And then all of a sudden, he's not coming back. He told, I think, the head pro maybe like a week or two before the season was going to start.
Yeah.
And then it was just myself and the head pro. So it turned into this crazy, great opportunity where I was doing everything and I was teaching a ton. And I went about 2 months without a day off. So that's originally when I got into the business, and it's been great ever since then. I've been in the Northeast down to Florida, where I worked underneath Gary Gilchrist at his academy for a number of years, and then back to New Jersey, where I became director of instruction. So it's been a fun little journey so far.
Awesome. So who were some of your other influences? Like who got you into teaching? Like it had to be before you went and worked for Gary. You said you were teaching a ton right off the bat. You had obviously a great opportunity, or there was enough people to work with there. So I guess a better question would be, what ignited you into thinking, okay, I want to do this full time, right? Because you could have been an assistant and gone many different routes.
Sure.
Like, do you remember a time where you said, hey, I really, one, maybe I have the talent, and then two, I have the passion to maybe do this all the time?
Well, I think what I found out immediately after my buddy kind of bailed on us was I hated everything about being an assistant golf professional. And the only
we have a lot in common.
Right. And the only thing that I enjoyed doing was teaching the game. So I had mentioned that we had the golf school there, and we were doing a golf school every single week, and they were pretty much full week golf schools. So
you were involved in the golf school right off the bat.
Oh yeah,
like,
and I'm 19 years old doing that.
Wow.
So I got really lucky with that, and I'm teaching all the time with the golf school. And then when I didn't have obligations running your daily operations and tournaments and things like that in the shop, I'm giving lessons as well. So it was a great opportunity, but immediately I found out I hated everything about being an assistant, loved teaching, just loved being outside, helping people with their games. And I had a good mentor at that time, the gentleman who was the head golf professional and who actually owned the shop there, Patrick Fannin, was really great to me and gave me the opportunity and was always there to help me out and gave me some great pointers for somebody that really didn't know too much. Again, like I said, growing up, didn't take a lot of lessons. I pretty much watched videos and read magazines and kind of skimmed through books, and that was about it, which maybe was a good thing based on some of the information back then. I don't know.
Yeah.
But
well, that's the thing. Yeah, it's like we go back, and I'm older than you are, but you're going to do the same thing. Is what were we teaching back in those days, right? You only teach what you know, which is whatever your influences were. Or typically, if you had some lessons or maybe you've watched somebody else teach, it's like you didn't have a whole lot of training. So you were kind of thrown into the water and like, let's see if you can swim, right? I mean, do you remember those days and like what you were teaching? And do you ever cringe and go, my gosh, I can't believe what I was telling people back in those days?
Yeah, right. So I think like we all kind of think back and we're like, wow, some of the things that I had learned or that I was teaching, I was like, there's no way we're doing that nowadays. But, this is going back, and I'm 34 going on 35. But like we had video, and I was like, oh, wow, they have video. How cool is that? Right. This is before radars and everything else that we do have now, luckily. But I remember just originally starting out, and it was all about the fundamentals of the game, grip and alignments and stance and posture. And my mentor at the time was big on that, and he was a good teacher. He had a good following where other than the golf schools, people were taking lessons from him. So obviously he was doing something well, or a lot of things well. And I just pretty much I learned from him. But I do remember it was a lot of the original kind of fundamentals of the game, and that's kind of all we were teaching. And I remember that because it was just the two of us, we had this interesting range where it was in between this community, and the backside of the range was maybe like 250 yards. So it was kind of like a shortish range, and we didn't have a picker, right? So I had to hand pick the range every single night. Like I had two shag bags just going to town like this every single night. So you'd be in the shop all day, or you'd do the golf school and then be in the shop and then a couple lessons. And then you're hand picking the range, like with, you know, your car lights on so you can actually see. I remember a lot I probably remember more from those days than I probably do even like just a couple years ago. So it was definitely a fun experience, but you do think back and some of the things that you were teaching and, you know, some of the advice you were giving, you're like, oh man, it's probably wasn't the greatest thing for that person, but what are you going to do? Right. You got to learn somewhere.
That's right. And then, so you're led to Gary Gilchrist, top coach. What are some of your other influences through the years, and maybe share what you've learned from Gary or anybody else that's had an impact on your career teaching wise?
Yeah. So even still to almost to this day, so from the time I first started to now, I've never been that big into reading books. So like I'll listen to your podcast and other podcasts, and people are like naming all the books they have in their shelves and what they liked here. And that's just never been me. Like I'll skim through a book. I'm a picture guy, right? I'm pretty simple. Okay. And so I've always been into just kind of, again, especially nowadays, because we've got technology, right? You know, back even when I was younger, there's YouTube and there's all these videos that you can watch that were helpful. And I remember back in the day, I would skim through all the Ledbetter and Jim McLean books. And if I could see some videos online, I would watch a lot of the big name coaches, Butch, Chuck Cook, which was awesome. I just listened to that podcast the other day. That was
really great. Good. Thank you.
He's a great guy. I've only met him a number of times, but just seems like just a really genuine guy. But yeah, so I honestly would just, I only knew kind of the big names in golf my first couple years teaching. And that's what I would gravitate towards. Nowadays, there's so many people that are really good at what they do. And there's so much information that's right at the, right in the forefront. I mean, you go online, you can Google and search anybody that you want, right? I mean, if you want to see what Gankus is doing, if you want to see what the Stack and Tilt boys are doing, if you want to see, you name the person, Chris Como, right? I mean, it's right there. So I still do a lot of that, and I try and shadow a number of people each year as well. But honestly, there's too many people to even mention an individual. I try and take little things here and there. Like I like how this guy said that, or I liked what he did in that live lesson here. And you just take all that information and you kind of just use it and you put it in your toolbox.
Right.
And that's been really helpful for me. When it comes to Gary and working under Gary for a number of years, that was a fantastic experience. Also, while I was at the Gilchrist Academy there was a lady by the name of Patty McGowan, which I don't know if a lot of people know the name, but she was actually the director of training under Ledbetter for 10 to 12 years. So any of the big name Ledbetter coaches that you would know, she pretty much trained all of them. So, you know, your Sean Hogan's, your Gary Gilchrists, your, you name it, right? She trained them. And then I got the opportunity to actually train with her when I first came on, because she was pretty new at the academy as well, doing the same position. So that was awesome. I mean, I spent a ton of time with her, and we would watch a lot of videos, and we would have a lot of hands-on training and go up and down the range when a lot of our juniors and professionals were training, and she would kind of pick my brain. What do you see here? What would you do? And then she would kind of give me her point of view. And there was quite a bit of training that went on to get to a point where you could teach at a high level at the academy. So eventually I became a senior coach there and had the opportunity to work with a large group of juniors and work with and assist Gary with tour players. I assisted Gary with over 16 PGA and LPGA and European and web players, you name it. So that was another great opportunity. And what I learned from Gary is Gary's had a system for a little while that he's learned under Ledbetter, and he's he still teaches a lot of that, and he's adapted a little bit as well. He uses a little bit of technology here and there. He doesn't rely on it. But what Gary, I think, is extremely good with is he's fantastic with people. He can build a golfer up and gives them self-belief. And it's amazing what he can do. I mean, you can have the same conversation with let's say a junior, and then Gary comes over, same thing, says the same thing. And it's all of a sudden this junior's like all hyped up, ready to go. And
they listen.
I just said that to you, right? It's like we've been talking about that for a week, and it's just how Gary relays information, and he's just fantastic with people. So I definitely learned a lot from Gary in regards to that, as well as running a really big golf academy.
Yeah, we call that presence. Yeah. I went through the same thing with Miss Rader. One of my mentors is, we'd be working with our little group, and you're telling them what you think in your mind is something, and then she comes by and says the same thing, and all of a sudden, they listen. Oh, wow, it's there's a lot to that piece of coaching. I mean, I think in a lot of that gets kind of swept under the rug when we have all this information out there, and there's so many smart people, and like you said, you're not. Don't worry about reading. I get on my guys. We talk about it a lot with the guys that work for me. Same thing. Like they're learning through video. They're learning through podcasts. It's audiobooks, right? Basically, it's what it is.
Yep. And
and it's also time efficient, where you're learning in your car, or, you're learning in your spare time. We read books because none of this other stuff was available.
Right.
It's really just a different climate. That's all it is. It's a different culture.
And so I've always been able to I'd build my golf library, right? So it's like I have a number of the books, but it's like there's some books I have. I don't think I've ever even opened them or read them. It's just like you just have them. Like it's
you just gotta have them
for what? Right. It's like everybody else has them and they say good things. So maybe I should get that. And once in a while I'll look at it, but you don't. So I think that's really important, though, especially nowadays. There's so many great opportunities and different ways to learn. And what I've told a couple of my assistants is I think the best way of learning is just to get out there and be able to spend some time with different coaches. I mean, you can learn so much just from spending, whether it's an hour, half a day, a full day, and spend time with as many coaches as you can that all maybe have different philosophies. That's where I've learned the most is doing that. I mean, it's because at the end of the day, that's what we do. We stand on a lesson tee when we deal with different people of different personalities. And it's always interesting to see other professionals doing that, how they deal with it, what they do in certain circumstances. So I think to me, that's huge.
Yeah, there's no doubt. And that obviously that's come up a lot on this podcast because I'm trying to give the young coaches out there some type of direction of what they should do. And everybody's different, right? I mean, but I think nothing can replace one experience of just teaching, like just getting in there and doing it, making a lot of mistakes, being aware of those mistakes. That's the people that don't succeed, is the ones that make mistakes and don't even know. And then 2 is spending time, like you said, it's Tony Robbins calls it modeling, right? If you don't know something, then find somebody that you admire or respect and start to model them somewhat. And then you'll find your own voice, or you'll find your own style, or you'll find your own information, which you've obviously done. And I was looking, I followed your career quite a bit, but I love the way you've sort of organized your philosophy. So go a little bit into how you came up with your philosophy, because it's very similar to mine, which is probably why I like it. Talk to me about how you sort of came up with that, and then we'll dig into what you call your 3 pillars of training, right? So it's like you got to have a philosophy, and then you got to have an idea of like, how do we make people respond to the information?
Yeah, for sure. So to me, in how I teach the game is I believe there's a ton of different ways to get it done. And as a golf coach, we just need to figure out which way is going to be the most efficient for the player in front of us. And that's probably going to be different from the last student you had. And it's probably going to be different from, the one after. So to me, being able to figure out what the player needs in front of you is huge. It's, kind of call it the cancer, right? And we've heard that before. You're trying to figure out what the one issue is that's kind of having a trickling down effect into the player's game, whether it's full swing or short game or putting or you name it. And from there, I try and build a plan around that for the golfers to follow in regards to, one, awareness, two, how to efficiently practice, because our golfers are awful at practicing. I've got students that have worked with me for a number of years, and I at times I still need to say, hey, remember in the videos on Coach Now, and we do I've got the plan, and then I also have the videos of me doing the off the ball drill and then the on the ball drill. Like, how often have you done that? And I'm like, oh yeah, I forgot. I'm like, how can you forget? It's right on, but so we have to keep providing that to our students, because if you only have them for a short period of time when they're in front of you, and then it's up to them to be able to be efficient with their practice time. So that's big, is trying to put that belief system in them that, hey, listen, if you want to make a change, you need to do a number of things, and you can do them in the office. You don't even need a golf club for a lot of these things, and it doesn't need to take a lot of time, but you do need to be efficient with your time. And then following that, once we get to a decent point, I like to try and get on the golf courses as much as I can, because that's where the game's played. I mean, we can be on a range and we can use TrackMan and we can get the numbers to a certain point, but the second the ball's, below their feet, above their feet, winds in their face, those numbers are going to change. And, they need to be able to understand why that might be happening and how to go about things a little bit differently.
Yeah. So if we go through philosophy is a big word. I mean, I think it's a very broad term. I call it framework, right? I mean, again, it's like, you got to believe in something,
right?
So your 4 keys are, efficient body pivot, controlling the swing bottom, which I call low point control or low area control.
Sure.
Managing the face and path with, again, and I always tell everybody, even when they ask me my philosophy, like, it's nothing mind blowing, but what else are you going to look at, right? Are you going to look at the bottom of the handle, or we're going to look at the club face, right? I mean, it's just, you got to look at something, and then creating speed. So you get all of those things together, and you can start to categorize whatever you believe in on either side of that. And I think I said this last night. I was on an IG Live with Jake Thurman. We were talking putting, and I believe this with all my heart. You can say that you teach the person in front of you and this and that, but we all have preferences, right? We all have a model, not so much a model, but we all have something that we like the way it looks. Okay. Now, good coaches have that ability to sort of pivot because they understand what causes different positions or different things to change. But we all have preferences, and I like that. I'm digging into some of your videos. You mentioned preferences. So take us through what would be your preference in body pivot, controlling the bottom of the swing, managing pace. Let's just say that you get a new student. We'll sort of, I'm going somewhere with this, I promise. we'll move into some maybe things that I like to hear is like, how do you do a typical lesson like with a first student, right? But give us your body pivot preference.
Sure. So I'll give you the body pivot preference. I'll preference it before I preference the preference. A lot of preference. No, but I'll say I'm huge with the club face. And to me, the club face has a huge influence on a number of things, body pivot and low point and speed and all that. But so sure. To me, in regards to the body pivot, it depends on the player in front of me and how much, we'll say, mobility they have. I'm a fan of golfers in the backswing being relatively centered. But in order to do that, if I have a golfer that is like hypermobile, I'm going to have to do something with their lower half. If I have a golfer that has no flexibility, I'm going to have to do probably the opposite, right? In order to kind of get the pelvis to work in a way so that then the torso can kind of work in a way, turning and tilting, so that we have a chance to have minimal movement off the golf ball. We know there's always going to be some type of minimal move off the golf ball. And based on the club that we're hitting, that might be a little bit more driver compared to a short iron, but that's my preference right there. I like to kind of minimize how much linear movement that we have in in the backswing there, because to me, if we set everything up in the backswing in regards to the club face being in a reasonable position for that golfer, and having their body kind of work how I'd like, where there's minimal linear movement off, they're going to have a decent chance, at least long term in the downswing, to both have the club in a position as well as their body in a position to be able to deliver both the face and the path in a way that's going to help them have ball control, and obviously, have solid ball striking as well. So to me, I'm big about keeping them relatively centered and just trying to figure out how each golfer goes about that in regards to their limitations.
Yeah, and you can go, this is teacher to teacher, right? We're not talking to average golfers, right? Not that I don't want to help average golfers out there, but we're talking teachers. So you can go into more detail than that. Like do you want the pelvis to be level? Do you want the right leg to stay flexed?
Right. Okay. So
do you want the shoulders to be level? Do you want them to have tilt? I mean, think about, and then we can talk about the club, right? This is the good stuff, man. This is what we want to know.
Well, this is perfect. See, I'm so used to being on the lesson tee at the country club.
I know.
I got to
quit dumbing it down. Give us the good stuff. Give us the technical stuff. Like,
I don't know how much good stuff I have, but I'll try here. So
you got plenty of good stuff. I know you.
Okay. So yeah, obviously, when a golfer is going to initially start the movement, what we find in the best players in the world and what we find with the better amateurs is from address, they're going to have some form of, it's very small kind of linear, we'll say, shift into, like, let's say the trail foot.
Under the pelvis is going to move a little bit to the right.
Small amount, right? Yeah, for sure. And then following that, there's going to be eventually some version of like a recentering. We've got the right or the trail hip obviously getting higher than the left. Torso's following with the trail shoulder getting higher than the left. So yeah, I mean, turns and tilts are really important. And then just trying to figure out, does this golfer need more turn or more tilt based on what their limitations are? How is that going to influence where the hands and the pitch of the shaft are? Even before that, right? I mean, if let's say you've got a golfer who has, an interesting, let's say, moves off the ball too linear, right, with the pelvis and then the arms raised, maybe you need to change something at address in regards to forward bend or pressure in the ground or things like that. So there's so many things that you can do in order to kind of get the golfer to be in my little area or window of being relatively centered. It just kind of depends.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it always depends.
for sure. But yeah, I mean,
but it's
huge,
fun.
right?
It's fun to talk. It's fun to like say, okay, here's my perfect looking swing, right?
Yeah.
I mean, we don't get to do that very often, and I get it. Like if we had to say depends on everything, we'd never have any answers.
Absolutely. And then, so to me, again, big on the backswing move. And then in the, pretty much the transition, we know that typically before a golfer completes their backswing, they're already getting kind of some pressure in the ground going towards the target. There's a little linear move followed by some rotation. And then they're going to have some hopefully some verticals. Just depends on how much, from about shaft parallel in the downswing to impact, and just, it depends on the golfer and just managing those, right? But if you can have like a good combination of those and figure out how to keep someone more, we'll say, centered, and then how they can pretty much kind of use the ground to push into their lead big toe to begin the transition, and then from there, how the ground kind of fights back in a way to help with rotation and verticals, they're going to be set up to deliver that club into the hitting area pretty efficiently.
The 3 pillars of your training, we can talk a little bit about that as well.
Yeah, for sure. So the 3 pillars, they're really basic, and they're similar to what I had talked about just a few minutes ago, right? So the first pillar is dynamics, which is pretty much me just giving the player something to work with in regards to getting the club and the body to work in a way to give them their desired ball flight, right? So at the country club level, The majority of golfers that are coming to my lesson tee typically are struggling with some form of a fade to a slice, and then you have the occasional better player that struggles with the hook, right? So it's, you can almost do it in your sleep to this point. I don't have a ton of tour players coming to the lesson tee right now. We got a couple that kind of come in and out when they're in between events, but that's about it. So working with the golfer and figuring out what their it is or what their cancer is, as I had mentioned before, and being able to improve that one thing, and then allowing the other pieces to fall in place after that. Because, like for let's say the fader or the slicer or the golf ball, almost always it's a club face issue. The face is wide open at a certain point in the swing, and then they're reacting to that, right? So being able to maybe get the club face in a better position will then eventually allow for the club to work a little bit differently and their body to work differently. I think the difficult piece with making any change, whether it's with the higher handicapper or the lower handicapper, or your tour player, is you need to figure out, one, what the actual biggest issue is, right? Because if you don't fix the biggest issue, the golfer's probably not going to get better. And then once you fix the biggest issue, they're used to like moving their body or moving the club in a certain way. So you're going to have to give them a little bit more in regards to a change following that, just as maybe an exaggeration or things they can do off the golf ball in order to make that change. Because, most people have been doing what they've been doing with a golf club in their hand for quite some time. And to be able to get a change to kind of be sticky and allow that golfer to improve, they're going to have a really good plan set in place, and they're really going to have to exaggerate the new move. And when they feel like they're exaggerating the absolute crap out of it, they're probably making like something like, as like that much of a difference.
Right.
Like, to me, that's really big. So that's the first pillar, is trying to figure out what needs to be improved with the golfer, so that we can begin to move forward. The second pillar is just preparation, and it's huge, because golfers need to know, okay, I have awareness now. I know what I need to do in order to improve my ball flight. I need to fix this one thing, and I have maybe this one or two drills, but then how do I practice it? Like, what am I doing when I'm at work or I'm at home that I can either do with a golf club or without a golf club that's going to help me increase not only my awareness, but help make the change stick. And then you have to give them something that when they're practicing, let's say on the lesson tee, or excuse me, not the lesson tee, the practice tee, I need them to do it for X amount of golf balls and X amount of time. And I tell them all, it's like, you don't need to be on the range beating balls for hours. You just need to be like really good. If you have 20 good minutes, like doing a specific set of drills, like early on when we're trying to make a change, that's really all I need. And I've got a kind of a preference for how I go about doing that.
Yeah. Talk about that. That was my next question, is like, what does that look like to you? Because everybody has their own style of like, I mean, I'm not big on giving practice plans. Like, we can do that, but I tend to sort of pivot based on the stats and the results that I hear my students say that they're doing well or doing poorly. Like, sure. What are you big on as far as practice?
Yeah. So I think it depends. And you always, as you mentioned, you need to pivot, especially as you continue to work together. So when you first make a change in that first lesson, you're going to have to give them, some in-depth practice habits at first, but maybe after the second lesson you have with them, you have to maybe tailor that a little bit differently, because they're probably going to, if you just continue to have them work on the original practice plan, they're going to exaggerate something so much that they're going to have the opposite problem, right?
They could go the other way.
Yeah. Sure. You always need to kind of continue to tailor it based on where the golfer is. And there's a number of things that I do in order to kind of figure out, how to go about tailoring it or changing it. And one, seeing what the ball is doing on the lesson tee or the golf course, depending on where we're at. That's huge, right? Two, getting feedback from the player. And I want to hear like what they're feeling, what they're seeing when they're playing and they're practicing. That's really big to me. And then based on that, then we can say, okay, now because you're doing a much better job with, let's say, the club face or the transition. And I typically like to try and show them the change as well. Because to me, a picture is worth 1,000 words, right? I mean, if somebody says, if the face was wide open and they were like, super over the top and swinging left through the hitting area, now the face is better and they're actually starting to shallow it a little bit, or the shaft isn't pitching as steep as it once was in the transition, that's really good feedback for them to see as you're explaining to them how to now tailor the practice plan a little bit, because they don't need to maybe exaggerate as much as they currently were, or they don't need to maybe hit as many golf balls exaggerating what they were. So I typically have a variation like at first where I'm going to say, okay, you're going to have the one concentration. This is the drill that I would like you to do. And I always want them to hit like double the amount of golf balls doing the drill, followed by like almost normal swings. And it depends on where they're at in the development. Like sometimes maybe those swings are only like shaft parallels. Sometimes maybe they're lead arm, trail arm. Sometimes maybe they can be full. It just kind of depends. But like, let's say I start them off and I'm like, when you're practicing, I want you to hit 12 golf balls doing this drill at what feels like a 50% speed, lead arm parallel to club head down, or lead arm parallel to arm parallel. And then following those 12 golf balls, then I would like to get you in, let's say, a normal stance, maybe picking up the pace a little bit, but they're only going to hit half the amount. So maybe they hit 6 golf balls. And they're only focusing at that point maybe on that one technical feel or cue. And then following those 6 golf balls, they go back and it's 12 and 6, 12 and 6. And then, you tailor it from there. Maybe they're not going to be doing as many drills. Maybe they can pick up the pace. Maybe the swing can be bigger. It just kind of depends on where they're at based on what we're seeing with the improvement.
Yeah, I love that. I mean, I'm big on deep practice, right? Slow motion stuff, half swing stuff. Couple of rapid fire questions that I asked. I think I started an open forum, and we can kind of go in, because I'm sort of trying to take the listeners from start to finish, right? Like you've already talked about, when you got somebody that's swinging too far to the left, somebody's swinging too far to the right, you're giving them drills, you're giving them exercises, you're giving them sort of a practice plan, and then we take them onto the golf course. What are a couple of your go-to drills for what we most commonly see, like you said earlier, is a path that's too far left?
Yeah, first thing I'm doing is I'm looking at what the club face looks like, how they start the backswing, and what the club face looks like at shaft parallel. From there, what the club face looks like at the top.
Do you want it? What do you want? Do you want it matching the spine angle? Do you want it toe up?
So my preference for, I would say, the majority of golfers is at shaft parallel. I like the leading edge of the golf club to match the spine.
There you go. Okay.
That's my preference there, right? For certain golfers, maybe it wouldn't be matching the spine as much with like a better player, but that's where I like.
We're talking about a slicer. We're talking about a fader that.
Sure. So then definitely want to make sure that we need to figure out a way to get that club face at shaft parallel to be matching the spine, whether it's grip, wrist condition, whatever it might be. That's going to be really important. In fact, depending on how aggressive the slice may be or how open the club face originally was, I might even actually try and get it a little close compared to the angle of the shaft, just to exaggerate the heck out of that. So the that position at shaft parallel is really important for me. And then from there, I like to typically get the lead wrist to be anywhere from, let's say, flat to maybe even a little bit bowed. And typically, when you're strengthening a grip, a lot of times a golfer might actually want to get a little bit more cupped. But that's what a lot of golfers will say. But to me, like when you have a weak grip, I see a lot of golfers already kind of rolling that face open and eventually getting that way. So, so to me, I want to. So to me, I want to make sure that at the top, once the face is better at shaft parallel, the lead wrist can be flat to bowed. I'm totally fine with the club face being a little closed, maybe even hooded at the top, like in a first lesson, so that they can learn how to like react to that and move differently, because they've never experienced that in their life. If they're, slicing the golf ball, the face is typically wide open, lead wrist is in extension, and they're, getting really steep with the shaft in the transition and swinging really left. So that's important to me. I've got a number of drills that I do in order to kind of help them with that. And one that works really good for me is I'll have them set the club face at the target at address, and then I want to take the feet, the hips, and the shoulders at address and get them really closed or pointed way to the right for the
back to the target drill.
Yeah, similar to that, right? And
Yeah.
as they're doing that, I get the ball position a lot further back than they're used to as well, just to kind of get them a feel for how the hands are going to work, and then how the shaft is eventually going to shallow and work more from the inside out. Because, I mean, even if you got them, let's say, close to the target, but the ball position's where it typically is for a slicer, which is really forward, like they're going to have a really hard time, and they're still going to want to swing, a little bit more left than I would like. So I try and do a lot of things just to exaggerate a golfer swinging the opposite direction. And, like a lot of coaches, I'll put maybe some constraints in the way, or some sticks, about 5 to 10 yards out in front of them as visuals, start line, curvature. I'll also do a lot of things off the golf ball as well, initially, just to give them a good feeling and understanding for how they need to, control not only the club face, the path of the golf club, and how their body's going to start working differently too. I mean, there's a lot of things that go into changing a club face. Everything else will eventually start to fall in line, but it's going to feel very foreign for the player at first.
So let's say you get the club face in a reasonable position that you like, and they're still swinging left. What are some of your good path drills?
Sure. So I've got a couple like linear bump exercises that I'll do to kind of help them maybe initiate or transition. So pretty much from the top of their backswing, I'll have them pause off the golf ball, and then I'll have them actually take their lead or left hip for the right-handed golfer and just almost shift it maybe a couple inches without turning towards the target. And all they're doing is they're just kind of shifting the hips that way. And then after they hold that position for a number of seconds, I almost just have them feel like there's an arm swing down and on the angle of the hips. And then I'll actually have them hit golf balls that way. I do a lot of change in direction step drills as well, like a lot of us do. And also when it comes to like alignments, I'm huge on alignments in regards to changing swing directions. A lot of times, like I'm totally good with, and my assistants will certainly they would back me up on this. I'm totally fine with having somebody play from a relatively closed position of both the feet, hips, and shoulders at address, so they can start to learn how to kind of move the golf club or shallow the golf club and then move it a little bit more from the inside out. Because when we were working, or I was assisting Gary with all those tour players, there was a very small amount of them, Jason, that actually tried to get lined up, right? Like with train tracks, like the old school, square alignments. Like they're all trying to, get set up in a way that's going to help them move the hand path and the club in a direction that's going to help them with their ball flight. So I'm big on that as well.
That's really good. I mean, I think I'm the same way, especially with driver, because we know now that we know the ins and outs of D-plane, as the ball gets forward, the swing direction tends to move left. I mean, you've got to shift the baseline to the right. And I'll tell people, it's amazing how people get caught up into thinking they have to be perfect with parallels and alignment. And I'd use that drill a lot during a lesson and say, well, close the stance, close the shoulders. I don't even care. Like if it gets them to change their swing direction, then it helps. And they're like, well, why can't I play like this? I'm like, why can't you?
Right. I get that all the time. They're like,
it's like, I mean,
why can't,
if you can go, if you can avoid, if you can ignore the fact that your friends might say, well, you're lined up to the right, like, don't listen to them.
Right.
Hopefully they've understood it.
And they're like, they'll come back after a couple lessons and they're like, I'm hitting it so much better. I'm playing a draw now and like I'm scoring better. But like my buddies, they're always like, they're giving me a hard time. They're trying to give me lessons on the golf course. And I'm like, yeah, but you're probably starting to beat your buddies now, right? And at the end of the day, we're just trying to improve and lower our scores. So if we're a little closed with our alignments, a little open, whatever it might be, it's whatever you can get to work to help you improve your game and bring more enjoyment. I mean, that's what it's all about.
No doubt. So give us a couple of your favorite drills for improving the low area of the swing. Let's say with an iron swing.
Sure.
We know hitting the ground in the right place is if there is a fundamental, that might be close. I don't use the word fundamental, but some of those would be, I think, interesting for the listeners.
Yeah, I mean, there's no player at a high level that's not hitting the golf ball first, right, when it's on the ground. So I would definitely, I mean, that's totally a fundamental, at least to me. The originals, as I mentioned, like that's how I started, right? The original fundamental.
The only reason I say it's not a fundamental is you don't have to do that with a pitch shot.
Yes, that's true.
That's the only. So it's like you can dig in, but let's just say we're just playing iron shots. That's pretty darn important. So that's a huge part, of a young coach getting people to hit it more solid, which could arguably be what hooks people into the game and gets them to have a little more fun. So what do you like to see, and what do you do with your players, assuming that everything else is reasonable? We've already discussed club face and the shape of the swing.
Yeah, so if everything's in a decent spot, I've got a number of drills that I'll tend to use. I would say my two favorites are either putting a lie board about a grip length behind the golf ball, or a towel. And depending on where the golfer is with their progress, I kind of like the towel more, because you can like fold the towel up and make it higher, right? Mm-hmm. So like, with somebody that maybe isn't at the highest of levels and is struggling with it, just laying the towel on the ground, like the lie board is okay. And then if, they tend to nick the towel's ruffled, so they'll get feedback and it doesn't make that loud, obnoxious noise like the lie board does. And then as they progress, you can start to get that a little bit thicker and a little bit thicker, so it's higher. So I like both the lie board and the towel drill, putting both of those about a grip length behind the golf ball. Another one that I like is one that I feel like I created it, but I have no idea. I probably didn't. We all think we come up with something and then we learn it somewhere, right? But and now I'm going to say this, and probably everyone's going to be like, yeah, that's been, a bunch of people do that. But okay. If we take, let's say, 3 tees and we lie them on the ground, putting the head of the tee towards the target side of the range, the golfer would address the back pointy side of the tee at address, and then make a swing and try and take the head of the tee off, right? So they're moving the low point forward about the length of the tee, if that makes sense. And if they do it really well, right? So let's say the target's like here, okay? Mm-hmm. If they do it really well and the golf club's working downward nicely, and they nick the head of the tee really good, it goes up like a football's being kicked, right? So like that's really good feedback too. So it goes directly up that way. Mm-hmm. If they don't do it as well, it shoots forward like so. Sometimes it breaks, but when they do it really well, it goes up like football. But I'll have them do that 3 times. So there's 1, 2, 3 tee, and then where the 4th tee would be, there's a golf ball. So they'll do the exercise with the tee. They'll make 3 swings, hitting 1, 2, 3 tee, and then there's a golf ball trying to get the same feel.
So they're basically going from like an inch ahead to like 4 inches ahead.
Yeah.
Of the ball, if you do it correctly.
Yeah.
That's great.
And, some golfers, depending on where they're at, I'm like, okay, we're going to do this, and I only want you to go to maybe like shaft parallel going back into a full finish, or lead arm parallel go back into a full finish. And some other golfers, it could be full, but that's a really good one too that I feel like works really well, because, you kind of add in almost an off the golf ball exercise followed with a golf ball immediately as they're getting into like a rhythm. So it's all set up. So it's almost like they're in a rhythm actually doing it. So I like that. And then I find another low point exercise that can be helpful, even for better players. Not that typically they struggle with a low point much, but like, let's say the better player that maybe gets the club a little bit too stuck behind them, right? Just simple like downhill lies, just like severe downhill lies, getting them on a downhill lie, having them react to the lie. I mean, that's simple enough. You don't have to really have much to set it up. And, they start to get a better awareness on what, they're feeling with the club and the body.
Yeah, that would go into the category of, drills for players that swing too far to the right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it sounds like, and that sort of leads me into my next question or topic, using the golf course or using the environment to get your players to change. And you mentioned earlier of spending time on the golf course. What are some of your drills, games, ideas that you use with your players on the golf course? Like, what's a playing lesson look like typically for you?
Yeah, so I would say it depends on the progress and where they're at. So like, let's say I'm working with a newish golfer. We've only had a couple lessons, maybe 2 lessons, and this is the first time that we're going on the golf course together. I'll pretty much like lay the framework before we go out. And I want to make sure that they're very aware that we're not going out here to try and see how many fairways we hit or how many greens we hit, how good our score is going to be. It's not about performance. I want to see if with real targets in different situations lies wind, if we can continue to keep the club face in a better position or shallow the golf club or whatever it might be. Let's say we're with a golfer that I've been working with for quite some time. And, you know, maybe we're getting ready for a tournament. There's going to be a lot of things that we're going to be doing in regards to preparation and routine. And instead of playing for score, I might create some type of random game where fairways are a certain amount of points, so are greens. If they miss on a certain side, there's deductions, or excuse me, it's an increase in points. Hazards are, you know, an X amount of points. And those games, I change the point structure all the time. And anybody can, you know, create any type of game you want with points, depending on the level of golfer that you have. I mean, if you're working with a golfer that's was slicing the golf ball and now they're hitting it straight, you can say that, you know, if you're in the right rough, you know, it's an additional 2 points. And if you're in the left rough, it's maybe 0 points, right? Fairways might also be, you know, it just kind of depends on where the golfer is. When I work with a lot of my juniors on the golf course, I'll do a lot of things where we take par out and we're putting them in situations where they have to hit certain shots and they only have X amount of attempts to hit a certain shot. So I like to kind of put them in situations with some pressure on them that they might come across playing in a tournament, instead of just going out and trying to shoot for a score. I honestly do a lot of the things I do on the golf course. I try and take par or the score out and kind of create my own type of situations.
So like putting them in the trees or putting them in a punch shot situation and say, hey, let's see what you can make.
Yeah, or even putting them at like X yardage and asking them, okay, from 160 yards, what club do we normally hit in a calm condition? They're going to say, I hit an 8-iron. And then I'm going to say, okay, here's your 5-iron. We need to figure out how to make this work, right? So just kind of allowing them to think about the situation, what they have to do, how they need to make it work, understand that the shot maybe doesn't necessarily have to be perfect in order to still get a decent result. Because, you know, when you work with juniors or high-level juniors, a lot of times they almost would be more satisfied with, you know, looking good than actually making like a birdie, you know, which seems crazy, but you know, it's been a little while since I was a junior, but I do remember being a junior and having some of those same feelings where it's like, you want to look good. You want to, you know, and if you hit a poor shot, you feel bad about yourself. And, you know, so you want to put them in situations where they can handle some of that adversity.
Yeah, for sure. It's adding stress to their game, or game like training is a big. And Highfield, you probably know him, I'm sure.
Yeah, so he came over to Gilchrist for a little while when originally when I was there. He was doing some things with him and Matthew Cook were both there together at the same time for a short period.
So good.
Yeah, absolutely. They do a great job.
What other things do you use, or any strategy wise for your competitive players that you use maybe on the golf course?
Yeah, and so I'll talk about what I do with the majority of, let's say, your adult to senior golfers, because at the club level we do see a lot of those. Strategy is huge. So for me, like let's say you have a newer golfer you're working with, and they struggle with their driver. Sometimes it's okay to, on certain holes, like you don't need to hit driver because driver adds an additional stroke, right? So being able to kind of coach them through and say, you don't necessarily have to hit this club. Or when you are in this situation, right, we don't necessarily need to go here. We can go sideways because we're going to have a better opportunity of putting it somewhere either on the green or up in front. So you're going to eliminate some of the big numbers. I can't tell you, and you know, I mean, how many times you're out with your club level golfers and they're, 20 some odd handicap and they're trying to hit it over a 20-foot tree that's 30 yards in front of them, you know, and so a lot of the average golfers we work with, they just really make poor decisions. So being able to kind of educate them and saying, like, sure, it's not the hero shot. It's not going to be like the most exciting shot when you pull it off. but it's going to help you lower your scores. And it's not always about par. It's trying to figure out how to recoup and make the lowest possible score you can on that hole and then move on.
Yeah.
I think,
yeah. How to keep them from making doubles.
Yeah. Or triples or what,
Right. I mean, yeah. It's like you're exactly right. It's like making the lowest score possible is a key phrase right there.
Yeah. And you work with these golfers, right? As I do. And you're out on the golf course and let's say there are 20 some odd handicap, right? And it's like, just because this says par 4 on the scorecard doesn't mean it's a par 4 for you. So being able to say like, this is your par on this hole and it's okay to hit this shot and it's okay to hit out sideways so you can give yourself an opportunity to get up and maybe get up and down or eliminate that big number is huge.
Yeah, for sure. So how are you integrating technology into your coaching? And what are some of the tools that you're using? What have you learned from them?
Yeah, so I'll always have TrackMan running every single lesson that I provide. I have 2 TrackMans. Right now, between TrackMan and I have a body track pressure mat, those are really all I'm using. The club I was at when I first came to New Jersey, we had all the bells and whistles. We had 3 TrackMan 4s when they first came out. We had Sam Putt Lab, Sam Balance Lab, K-Vest. So I was using all those and I find them to be helpful, but at the end of the day, they're just good diagnostic tools, right? So for me, all I really need is to just have some data with maybe TrackMan to kind of back up what my eyes are telling me, and maybe just to give the golfer some feedback to say, hey, you came in and you were doing this with the face or the path. And after we just made that change and we're 3 swings in, see how this number changes. So that means not only can you see it on video, but now it also backs it up and they can start to say, oh yeah, okay, so I'm working in the right direction, although it might feel extremely strange to them.
Yeah. That's a great point that you're basically quantifying feel through the changing of the numbers.
Absolutely. And I love technology. I think it's all really good. I think right now there's so much of it, right? Everything you could possibly want, we really have. And I think they're great tools, but to me, I just try and kind of use them and make sure that when we're making changes that we're moving in the right direction. And I try and keep it as simple as that.
No, that's great. And that's what I use too. I got, I'm a body track guy and obviously TrackMan. You don't need too much more than that, right? Unless you're doing some 3D stuff. Again, it takes up a lot of time, and we're working with similar clients, which is club players for the most part and some competitive players as well. But the club players are the ones that we make our living with, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah. So it's like, you don't need too much.
I mean, honestly, if you can, you don't even, I mean, it's great to have technology. It's
absolutely.
It's huge. And for a lot of people, it might be, or a lot of your students coming in, it might be a selling point. Hey, this guy has TrackMan and this guy doesn't, so maybe I want to see him. But at the end of the day, there's so many good coaches that maybe aren't using technology still, and I'm not advocating that at all. But at the end of the day, it's just a tool, and I feel like a lot of coaches, especially the younger ones now, there's so much into the data, and I think they lose sight of dealing with the person in front of them, right? I mean, you can know everything underneath the sun, but at the end of the day, you need to be able to communicate it. People need to believe in you. They want to spend time with you. And that's how you continue to be successful, I think. And fill your book and be able to take care of your family.
Yeah, that's one of my favorite topics, as you know, listening to the show, is considering the difference between IQ versus EQ. Right. So how do we've talked about, the IQ again, I think is available, and you can get as much information as you want and you can regurgitate it. And I've seen young coaches do it and they're brilliant, but the EQ stuff, I think, still tends to be the sort of secret sauce that gets them to another level. Right. So how is that developed? Because that's always an interesting question, is like, how do you think you've developed that as a coach, building the relationships? I guess I can leave it open to where, like, what do you think is involved? That'd probably be a better question. What's involved in the EQ part? and then we can dive into how that's developed.
Yeah, I think, Jason, I think some of it can certainly be learned, and I think another portion of it maybe you just might have. There's so many bright people I know that they're so smart and they know everything, and they don't necessarily have the personal skil's. And right. I don't know at a certain point how you maybe develop them, because a lot of these coaches that I know and I spend time with, they've been coaching for a really long time. So it's not like experience, or maybe it was just poor experience or lack of experience at an early age. But so I would say if anything, like early on experience is big, but I don't know how much of that can help. I think, again, a lot of it is how maybe you were brought up. And to me, I always try and treat people, especially students, I want to treat them as I would want to be treated. And I understand, especially somebody that's coming to my lesson.
Yeah. Put yourself in their shoes, right? Empathy.
100%. I mean, somebody that's coming to your lesson for the first time, and maybe they don't know you, and they're going to be nervous, and you need to have some tools in your toolbox to be able to make them feel at ease and be able to kind of get them a little bit more comfortable and figure out exactly who they are and why they're there and what they do. And all those things are really important to, I think, helping the student in front of you. And I honestly, I think I was brought up in a way where, treat people as you want to be treated. I remember my mom telling me that very often. Right. And I still, to that day, that's something that I try my best to do on the lesson tee. And I think it can be learned in a way. I think people can get better, maybe if they don't necessarily have that. But I don't know how much they honestly can improve. It'd be an interesting case study.
It is. I mean, we're sort of spitballing here, and I'm thinking off the top of my head, it's like, what encompasses that side of our coaching, right? So it's, body language, which I've read books, I've listened to podcasts, I've listened to audio tapes, hundreds and hundreds of hours of sort of motivational tapes of, that side of human development, right? How do we coach? Like you said, we're coaching people here, right? The golf side is separate. And then the bedside manner, which is what you're talking about, is simply, do you want to treat people kindly, or do you want to be mean to them? And there's a fine line there, right? I think that this is a great discussion, because there is a time, and the older I get, I sort of dig into that, because again, it's having the presence and laying the groundwork of relationships and people trusting you. That's the first thing. I can be a little bit tough on people sometimes, right? I mean, they need it. And again, but as long as they understand it's coming from a place of love, then they get it. I mean, I don't know if that makes sense, but it's really, and that's, again, it goes back to just knowing people. It's just knowing the person that's in front of you and being able to read that person at that point. As I always tell my guys, you've got to dig deep every day into that person that walks into your room, whether you are on your lesson tee, whether you know them 100 lessons or the first lesson, because it's a cat kicking world. You don't know what they've gone through that day. You don't know what they've gone through that week before they got to you. So you got to be really, really careful.
100%. And that also makes me think about the question of, how do you motivate a person or a student? And I think as coaches, we have an obligation to do our best. But if someone isn't motivated in everyday life, or maybe they're motivated in a certain area, but they're not necessarily motivated to improve their game as much as maybe you'd like them to improve, and they just want to go out and enjoy themselves with their buddies. I mean, that's a difficult thing to try and figure out to do. It's like, how do you motivate somebody, or how do you improve people's personal skills? It's a fine line, right? I mean, it's difficult to figure out.
Well, that's the commitment. Yeah. The commitment level that you sort of try to gauge again. And I'm very distrusting a lot of times when I do my interviews. Right. Because we know that, people have a difficult time with self-assessing or self-aware of what, we all say we want to lose weight, but what are we going to do to actually accomplish that? We all say we want to. We all walk into a golf lesson and say, "Hey, fix me. I want to drop 5 shots off my handicap." But do we truly want to do the work, and do we know what's involved? Right. So it's like that's what we're dealing with from our side. It's not easy.
Yeah, and that's the hardest part is people will tell you what they want to do or they want to do that day. And then, like, I'm sure, like you, I have a lot of players that consistently come and see me, and they're in programs. And, you know, when we originally write down goals, I'm like, well, this is what you told me. And we said we need to do X, Y, Z. And then, you know, you don't necessarily, you're not doing that, or you're saying you don't have the time. And, like, we're not asking for much, but it's you know, it's a fine balancing act. And that's when you had mentioned a few minutes ago, it's like, sometimes, especially if you know the person, like, sometimes you have to be a little bit hard on them, right? I mean,
you got to give them the truth.
100%, because, you know, otherwise it's like, well, maybe we're wasting each other's time if that's the case. You can get them really good in front of you in that 30 minutes or 45 minutes or an hour, but to make a change, you know, take place and to improve their golf game, it takes a little bit more than that.
It does. That's great. I mean, it's just that's a deep discussion. I'm not sure we have, you know, it'll be hours.
I could rant on that for hours.
Yeah, exactly. So talk. Let's dig into a little bit of some more personal development as we're sort of talking about it. But do you have any things in your career that you would consider roadblocks or failures that have either taught you a lesson or have spurred you on to later success that you would be willing to share?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, there's probably there's a number of things, and I'm sure my wife could tell you a lot too. I've been with my wife for quite some time now, and I think early on in my career, she probably thought I was crazy because I was always trying to, you know, because we all have goals, like you have goals, and we're trying to figure out how to obtain those. And sometimes you have to bounce around a little bit in order to kind of get to where you initially want to be. And that can be difficult, whether it's difficult on you or difficult on your girlfriend or wife or family or whatever it might be. Right. So that's one thing. And then there's, you know, I'll say probably recently, and I'm fine being open with this. Recently, about the last year and a half, I made a change. When I first moved to New Jersey, I took a position at a club, and I was the director of instruction there for a number of years. And then as things in the business changed, we had a new director of golf come in, and we just didn't get along. And I probably could have been, I probably could have played the game a little bit better, but I just didn't get along with this gentleman. And looking back on it, you know, it was like, you know, I have a great thing going now, and everything's still great. But, you know, it's like, if you just played the game a little bit better, could you have last there a little bit longer? Would you have been true to yourself? No, that's the thing. But that's the difficult thing, right? It's like, that's not me. I can't fake it when people are being nasty or saying nasty things or not giving somebody a chance or whatever it might be. Like, I have a difficult time doing that. So, you know, but I always think about it. It's like, you know, because everything was fantastic there. And then they brought in a great director of instruction there now. He's a Hall of Famer. He's got it made, right? And I've got it made. Now I just have to travel a little bit more in my car to the two clubs that I'm teaching out of now.
You didn't move. You just moved places that work.
Yeah. So, like, we love where we live. We're in a great spot, and you know, we like it because we don't feel like we're in Jersey. We have a fair amount of land, and it's quiet. So we stayed where we're at. I'm in the car about almost 3 hours a day total, which is a lot.
Wow. Okay.
Before it was, you know, it was maybe I don't know, under an hour total. So that's the only thing that makes me think, you know, if I had played the game a little bit better, you know, maybe I could have stuck around a little bit longer. But you know,
you wouldn't have been happy
from these things, and I wouldn't have been happy, and I was already looking for new positions. But, you know, moving forward, it did teach me something. You know, it's like, you know, because I got lucky, honestly. It's like I could have I could have been out of a job, right? If I didn't have the two clubs interested in me that I'm at now, it's right. So
Yeah.
I could have been out of a job and been looking for a job and maybe not have found something. So, just
Well, and when you're not happy in a situation like that, you're not going to be your best self, and you're not going to be your best coach to your players. I think, it's a trickle down
100%.
a little bit. It's tough to think of it that way, but I mean, I know when I go into work in a bad mood, I'm not the best coach. You know what I mean? It's
right. I mean, that's, we've all been in situations where we're unhappy, and it makes things uncomfortable and difficult, right? For whether we're at work or maybe even when we get home from work. So
absolutely. Yeah. And the people around you, right? So your mastermind crew, which is your wife and your family, definitely has an effect on them. A couple more questions here. These are always fun. Just digging into like your daily habits, like what has to happen for you? What's a perfect day, and what has to happen for you to have a great day? What are some of your tactics or tricks?
Yeah, that's a good one. Well, first, no traffic. That would really make my day. Especially
good luck up there in New Jersey and New York, right?
My goodness, I'm on like 4 different highways to get to my my club. So, so
I mean, like when you get up in the morning, right? Like, take us through. You know what I'm getting at.
I know.
What happens? What happens when you get out of bed?
Yeah, right. So definitely need my coffee in the morning to get me going, feeling good after my coffee. Got to check out what's going on the sport lines. I'm a big sports fan, so I always do that. Need to make sure I give myself some ample time to kind of get up to running on maybe some emails I couldn't get back to or texts from my students, because we all have those. Sometimes, as you know, you can feel a little overwhelmed if you're rushing around and trying to get to emails and text as you're, going to the club. So making sure I've got some time to follow up.
What time do you get up?
Oh, so I get up. Well, I would say
on a typical day, not now, but like we're actually working.
Sick. Yeah. Well, we're actually it's been a while here in New Jersey, so I don't even know what that feels like anymore. But yeah, normally when when I got to get to the club, it's 6 a.m. doing that. So grab that coffee, check the sports lines. If I have some time, even turn on Sports Center or Fox Sports just to get kind of caught up. As I mentioned, big sports fan, and then from there, kind of getting ready for the day. Emails, phone calls, texts, hopping in the car, praying for no traffic. And then once I get to the club, it's great. I've got a fantastic setup there. Members are good. Do my thing. I would say that if I could have my way and be incredibly happy throughout the entire day, give myself maybe and I like to try and do this year, like an hour block to maybe actually be able to work on my golf game a little bit. That's something I think would be incredible, because I haven't done that in quite some time. I haven't been able to compete and play in section events in quite some time, because as you know, you get busy and you're teaching all the time and you just you lose sight of that. So I would definitely make sure I give myself a little block, and then I'll do my lessons, and then maybe finish up and play a few holes and pray for no traffic coming back home, and then spend time with my family. We had a baby girl in September of last year, so she is it's been a lot of fun. So being able to get home to her now is most important, and play with her before she has to go to bed, and then do it all over again.
Yeah, that's your life just changed.
For sure. I mean, and I was going to ask you, I had a question for you, especially when your kids were younger. How did you go about balancing both, your family life as well as being, whether it's at work or on the lesson tee, whatever it might be?
The best answer is I didn't.
It's tough, right?
It really is. Yeah. I don't know. Again, as I get older and I've been in this business for a long time, I'm not sure anybody that is super successful has balance. I know a lot of people don't want to hear that, but I think what I've done, especially since I've started working at Carmel, like when I was in the golf school space, when I was working for Dana, I had no balance. I mean, it was crazy. I mean, it was by design though. I was building my career, building my brand, building my reputation, and my kids were younger, like yours is, starting out now. It was very difficult. It was very difficult. But what I would tell you is when you are there, when you're with your family, you've got to be present. And I have a tough time doing that a lot of times, but I've gotten better over the years, right? So it's not about the amount of time, it's the quality of time when you're with your family.
I like that.
Because it's only going to get better now. Like it's only, I mean, it's amazing. I mean, again, time flies and everybody tells you that when you got young kids, but it does. It happens, and my kids are now in college, and, my son's playing college golf, which has been a dream of his. And it's obviously a pretty proud moment for me, and my daughter's doing awesome in college and is going to accomplish big things. But it's like watching them grow up. You just can't replace that. Right. So as busy as I was, this is something I'm really proud of, as I never missed, very rarely. I mean, I would say 98% of the time I was at Nick's football games, Brittany's softball games, her dance recitals, Nick's golf tournaments. Like that's the thing. Like, it's not about, I mean, everybody, you could look back and say, well, I've left a lot of money on the table, and I have, but I don't even care. Like, I would not replace those moments for anything in the world, because I've watched my kids grow up in a very different, busy occupation as we have as golf instructors. It's just crazy. So you will figure out how to do it, is the best advice. I have no idea how I did it. And I had great bosses. Dana was awesome to let me sort of work my schedule around some things. My boss now has allowed me to travel and help Nick, with golf tournaments, and go see Brittany at her sorority parties and inductions. I mean, it's just all that stuff. It just, I don't know. You just figure it out. That's yeah.
Great. I mean, I love that too. It's the quality of time, right? I mean, it is. That's huge. And I've always tried to, I don't know how anybody can be extremely successful, because normally successful people are relatively busy. Like, I've always thought, like, how do people actually balance this?
Yeah.
Yeah.
You got to throw that word out the window. Like, balance. You're not, if you're going to be good at something, you're going to be obsessive. You're going to be over the top, curious and passionate about it. You're going to want to know more about it. And that takes time, and that takes sacrifice. And a lot of times it's going to be, to the detriment of people around you. But the best thing is, I've got the best wife in the world. She supports everything that I've done. She's made massive sacrifices to me in my career, and I know that. Now, if you don't have that, then it doesn't happen, So it's like, I don't know. That's a tough question, but that's my perspective.
That's good. And I think certainly having a significant other that gets it is huge. I mean, my 100%. Wife known me since middle school, actually. And she's gotten the whole golf thing. She's seen me since the beginning. So, but I think it's difficult for some people that maybe get in a relationship and they're already in the golf business, and the other person really doesn't understand, the hours and what goes into it. It's got to be really difficult.
Yeah. My wife will tell you, she knows what she signed up for.
Right.
I mean, again, it doesn't make it right or wrong. It's just, that's reality, right? So your wife knows that she signed up for an unusual occupation that is going to require you to be away from home a lot, to be doing things to get better, and to study, and to do things that doesn't make sense to the average person.
Right.
Like podcasting. Right.
Especially so it's like up to 3 hours to edit. I mean, holy cow.
Yeah, it's no different. And it's no different than when, we first got into social media. I started a blog and started shooting videos on YouTube. I had a YouTube show. It's all evolving. It's the same thing, right? When my family would go to bed, I'd put the kids to bed, my wife would go to sleep. I would be up till 2 or 3 in the morning, writing and editing videos, and it's kind of the same thing I do now. So it's like, what do you want to be mediocre? Or do you want to be the best?
Right.
That's
100%.
That's the thing. So
let me ask you, do you feel like you get more accomplished in the morning or at night?
I'm a night person.
Me too. And I don't know
for whatever
why.
reason. I don't know. It's just the way I'm wired. But yeah, I'm more, I've never, again, we talked about the running thing earlier, and I would get up at 3:34 in the morning to run. That's once a week. That was a massive sacrifice for me. That was not something I really wanted to do. Right. I'd get more done at night. It's just the way I'm a night owl.
Yeah, I am too. And I've tried to like do things in the morning. It's just not the same for whatever reason.
Got to figure out what works for you, man. It's just like golf. It's like learning golf. You got to figure out what works for you and your daily habits. Not every high performer gets up at 4:30 in the morning. I don't care what they say. Like, it's just, how do you get the most out? I just started wearing a Whoop band, which is a fitness recovery tracker.
Okay.
And it's been super interesting just to, and I got this CBD company that's helping me sleep because I just don't sleep very well.
I know. I always hear the commercials, and I've tried a number of different companies. I haven't tried them, so I have to might have to take up on the offer that you allow for all of us to get a nice little discount.
Yeah, it's just a busy, having a busy mind. It's like difficult to shut it off sometimes, right? So that's my challenge. But as you get older, when you get into your 40s, and we talked about it, when you're working out, I've always been active fitness wise and running and working out. Like, you've got to have recovery is massive, and sleep is really, really important. And that's something that I haven't really paid attention to over the years. And now I'm sort of trying to do better at that. And it's like, you get your recovery score every morning of how well, and it shows you how well you slept.
Oh,
shows
wow.
you your interruptions. Yeah. It shows your heart rate. Like, it's an amazing device, and I'm not sponsored by Whoop unless they want to sponsor me.
Right. You are now.
Yeah. So that's, and I just had Scott Stallings on the podcast a few weeks ago. He's a big advocate, obviously, with his fitness. Rory's using it. There's a lot of, and my son actually got me on it. He heard it from, I think, Scott Stallings, and I was like, wow, that's interesting. And I was really curious of the sleep part because I just don't sleep very well. And now I can tell, how well I'm sleeping, whether it's REM, like deep sleep, REM sleep, when you're awake, how many interruptions you have during the night, and how actually good sleep you got during one evening. And it makes a big difference, man. So when we get back to it, I'm ready to go.
I'm going to have to check that. How do you spell it? Is it just WOOP?
No, it's WHOOP.
I was so close.
Yeah. Yeah, WHOP. Yeah, just check it out. And then they have a podcast that you can kind of learn more about it, but it's great.
Very cool.
All right, cool, man. So the final question.
Oh.
You've given us a lot of great information tonight, and you know what it is. If you had to get a message to the world and put it on a gigantic billboard, what would your message, what would your mantra, what would your quote be, and why?
So obviously I know this is the one question that you're going to ask because I always listen to your podcast, and I honestly didn't think about it too much. But let's play on a couple of things we talked about. I would say be your best you. Try and figure out like what makes you tick, and if you're doing something you're not currently happy with, whether it's occupation, relationship, whatever. I think that's huge. You got to be happy. And, being your best you to me is also treating people with the respect that you would want to be treated with. And living in the Northeast, that's certainly something that is lacking quite a bit up this way. So I'd love to plaster that everywhere off of 287 in New Jersey here.
That's great. That's fantastic. So before we close, give us your platforms. How can people to say thank you to you, your Twitter, your Instagram, Facebook, and then plug the website, and how can they buy your training aid?
Sure. They can find me on pretty much all platforms at BS3 Golf. You can find more about me and my coaching at bs3golf.com. In regards to Impact Press, my training aid, you can also find me on pretty much all platforms at Impact Press Golf, and you can check out the training aid at impactpressgolf.com.
Awesome, man. Thanks so much for your time and for coming on and your knowledge. And this was great. So anything that I haven't asked you that you'd want to talk about, or
I had one quick question for you to finish off. And I've already asked a couple, but I'm curious, what type of coaching programs do you currently run at your club?
Yeah.
For let's just say your club golfers. I'm sure you offer a lot for juniors and everything else, but just your...
great question. That was one I was actually going to ask you earlier, and I forgot. I've gone through a bit of an evolution probably in the last 5 or 6 years into long-term coaching programs. So I started out doing a Biggest Loser program, which is not anything new now. It was back 6-7 years ago, to where it was a combination of private lessons and supervised practices. Then it had a competition piece where your group would have a competition to see who could drop their handicap the most. And there would be winner, there'd be prizes. I would get sponsors and whatnot. And we had like a big break day at the end of it, really fun, and do some like golf tournaments, which was awesome. But as you know, being in a private club, it sort of runs the gamut. So 4, 5, 6 years into it, you start to see the participation go down a little bit. So I switched it up, and one of my big programs was an unlimited yearly program, which I was pretty successful with. I didn't want to, you don't want 100 people in that, but you can get 10, 15 people, and that's pretty good. So I said, well, shoot, and I had 2 new coaches coming on, Seth and Robbie, that are working for me now. We're trying to build their books up and trying to get them more touches and get them, busier. I said, why can't we just try that, but let's do different time frames. So last year I started with, we still have the 5 lesson, we call it the burst, which is 5 lessons. It used to be our level 1 coaching program, which was like 5 lessons plus a couple of supervised practices, but we just took the supervised practices out, and I have my guys like Seth and Rob. Seth does my juniors, which we have a massive junior program, but Robbie will do some small clinics. So we kind of got the clinic thing covered already, which is sort of old school paradigm shift, right? So then we have the 5 lesson burst, and then we do 3 months, 6 month, and a year unlimited packages. So you can take as many lessons as you want. For me, I have a constraint where you can't take more than 2 or 3 a month. I'm sorry, 2 or 3 a week, not month.
Okay.
Yeah. So it's like you get, depending on, you don't want one guy jamming up your schedule for the whole week. And then juniors too. And then we have a junior level and we have an adult level on that. And it's been really, really great because it's sort of, one, it fills your book with people that are passionate and want to, serious golfers that really want to get better. Because I think that's the long-term programs are the key to getting golfers better. Like we talked about earlier, it tests their commitment level, right? So it's like you either, if you're going to pay $5,000, you better be serious or you're wasting your time and your money, and that's on them, right? So it kind of gives them a little bit more ownership of their game, and they love it because then as coaches, now we can take our time and do it properly. We don't have to feel like we got to give them everything in 2 lessons. So that's been my new thing, and it'll change. I mean, we keep evolving and doing some different things, but that's been probably the most, that's the backbone of my coaching programs right now.
Love it. I'll have to, I'll get your costs on those once we get off this. I'd be curious to see what you're charging for those, because I do a lot of similar things and I'm huge into long-term coaching also. So that'd be great.
Yeah, man. Awesome, buddy. Thank you so much for coming on.
This has been great. Thank you, for having me.
You got it, bud. You're the best.
No, you're the best.
What's up, everyone? Guru back here again with a couple of things before you jump off. First, big thank you to Bill for coming on the show and sharing his story and his incredible teaching and coaching knowledge that I know all of you are going to benefit from. So we really appreciate him sharing. And make sure you reach out to him on social at BS3Golf on IG and the Twitter. Thanks again to our sponsors, NVeedHemp.com and Swing U. Of course, go on to NVeedHemp.com to get your immunity dose on your tincture and all your CBD goods. Use the promo code GURU20 for that to get that 20% discount for life. And make sure you go check out my app at the App Store. Download the Golf Guru app, and I will look forward to seeing you in the app on the other side for you coaches and players. And you can also follow me on the Twitter and Instagram at Golf Guru TV. I appreciate all the love. Got a lot of new followers lately, which has been great. Also check out my website at golfgurutv.net, where you can find videos, articles, and more information on my teaching and coaching. And that is actually getting a makeover right now, so it's going to be awesome. Very excited about that. If you have any questions or comments, you can email the show at golfgurushow@gmail.com or just hit me up on the DM. I appreciate all the DMs. Be patient. I'm trying to get to all of them and answer them appropriately, so I appreciate that as well. Music is by Kevin MacLeod and Zach Mullet. And leave me an iTunes review. I appreciate all the 5-star ratings that I'm getting. That's awesome. It would be really cool to show up on the iTunes list at some point. And then as I leave you with, from every show, something that I live by: study, practice, teach, and then pass it on. Thank you so much for listening. Talk to you next time.